If there's one thing that's clear, it's that the political right does not like the New York Times. They argue that the Times is biased with regard to its reporting on conservatives and specifically when it deals with Donald Trump. I've been wanting to do a deep dive on this subject for some time now because it really does matter, especially as we are heading into the 2024 presidential race. If large swaths of people do not trust one of the main sources of news, well, that says something, and that is something that we all really need to consider. But instead of going back in time and looking at every single piece that the New York Times has ever written to be able to assess if it's impartial, I decided, let's just look at a sample. Let's go through the paper today and assess, does this paper inspire confidence that it is dealing with the news objectively? I'm Julie Hartman, and this is Timeless. Hey everyone, and welcome to Timeless. It is great, as always, to be with you. Just a reminder that in addition to Timeless, which premieres every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, you can also catch my show with Dennis Prager on this channel that's called Dennis and Julie, and it premieres every Monday at 1 o'clock Pacific and 4 o'clock Eastern. And of course, you can listen to these shows on Apple and Spotify and anywhere you get your podcasts. And one of the great things about listening to this or watching this show, as opposed to listening to it, is that you can see my outfit. You don't get that when you listen on the other platforms. And you'll see if you're watching today that you're looking at a gray lady. And that's pretty apropos of this discussion as we are talking about the OG gray lady, which of course is the New York Times. That is how the New York Times has been known, really, for decades. It has been called the Gray Lady. You know how I learned that, by the way? Was reading Ashley Rinsberg's book called The Gray Lady Winked. That is a book that everyone should read, especially if you want to know more about this subject. That is the objectivity, or perhaps lack thereof, of the New York Times. So again, today, what we're going to do is look at one single issue, today's issue of The Gray Lady. Today is Thursday, December 14th, 2023. And we're going to be looking at 3 different articles. Obviously, there are dozens of articles in this entire paper, but we don't have all day to go through every single one of them. So I've highlighted 3. And let me tell you my thinking behind that. All 3 of them have to do with the 2024 presidential race, Trump and Biden. And 2 of them are news articles, and 1 of them is an editorial. And we're going to go through each of these and again, really assess, does this paper inspire confidence in the readership that they are reporting on the news in an objective way? Now, I totally understand that with regard to editorials, it's different. You don't have to be objective in editorials because it's positioned as an opinion piece. But the reason why I put the editorial article in here is because the attitudes espoused in that editorial, I think, there's reason to believe that they are similar to the way that the entire paper views the Trump versus Biden matchup. And also, I tend to think that in the New York Times editorial section, they tend to really amplify a certain viewpoint. Whereas in other papers' editorials, for instance, the Wall Street Journal, I see that they really do try to provide diversity of viewpoint, especially with regard to Donald Trump. For instance, over the past few days, I saw that there was a editorial in the Wall Street Journal written by Liz Cheney, who's no Trump fan, obviously, and she was denouncing Donald Trump and saying that he has authoritarian tendencies. But then I also saw in the past few days another editorial in the Wall Street Journal which said that the people who think that Donald Trump is an authoritarian are going way too far and are over-exaggerating. I don't see that same kind of diversity of viewpoint in the New York Times editorial section. But we're going to get to that. Let's start first with these 2 news articles, okay? Quickly, though, up in the top, left corner of the New York Times, you're always going to see 7 words: all the news that is fit to print. That is the motto of the New York Times. And so we kind of need to apply that viewpoint to these news articles that we are looking at, okay? So today, December 14th, let's look at the first cover story. And that is, it's called "The Troll Army That Wages Trump's Meme War." Okay, this is a cover story today. And by the way, I'm going to be fully transparent with you right now, as I always am. I am very conflicted about this article as far as my analysis here of if the New York Times inspires confidence in the readers that they are reporting on the news objectively. There are some things in this article that I don't think are very objective and I think do kind of indicate a bias. But then there are other things where I go, you know what? This needs to be said. So I just want to be upfront with that. I will always be clear to you about what I believe and the way I'm kind of looking at things. In this one, I wish I could give you a more hard and fast viewpoint that I have, but I'm very conflicted. So let's dive in. To give you a one-sentence summary of the article, because it's a long one, you can read it if you want, but it'll take you a few minutes, is that the New York Times is reporting on these meme accounts, and specifically an individual who creates a lot of memes. And they are saying that these meme accounts are very disparaging of Trump's opponents. They are filled with racial innuendos, and that the Trump campaign is cheering these posts on. In fact, even the subtext here of this article is "a flood of crude posts cheered on by the former president." So that's setting the scene. Now let me read to you the first sentence of this piece. The video, called "Let's Get Ready to Bumble," is a slick mashup. Small print here. Is a slick mashup of President Biden's verbal slip-ups and his stumbles, set to a thumping 1990s dance track. Okay? By the way, they always do this in the New York Times. And to me, and people may obviously disagree with me, and I encourage them to do so, to me, when they start out with this kind of like almost storybook first sentence, that automatically doesn't inspire a lot of confidence that they're being objective. You know, when you're reading a newspaper, you want a factual first sentence. This is kind of like you're walking into like a story and they're setting the scene for you. It's this kind of narrative journalism, which has really become in vogue over the past few decades. But again, just, I don't know if it's how I would report if I were writing for a newspaper, but just wanted to highlight that for you, okay? So they're talking about this video that was shown at a Trump rally of President Biden's verbal and physical stumbles. And they detail that it shows him falling off a bicycle, flubbing a line in a speech, etc. And then they go on and they say that this video is a part of a larger social media flood of content that belongs to, quote, a small circle of video meme makers who have effectively served as a shadow online ad agency for Trump's presidential campaign, okay? Much of the group, which refers to itself as Trump's online war machine, operates anonymously. Cheered on by President Trump, the group traffics freely in misinformation, artificial intelligence, and digital forgeries known as deep fakes. And this is the key sentence. Its memes are riddled with racist stereotypes, demeaning tropes about LGBTQ people, and broad scatological humor. Okay, so let's look at one of the videos. The first thing that they mentioned was "Let's Get Ready to Bumble." That is the mashup, and let's watch that, and then we'll talk about some other of the memes.
How would you say your mental focus is?
Oh, it's focused. I haven't, look.
Let's get ready to bumble!
I think it's a right for people to have bad health care. True international average of pressure. God, oh my Lord, I can't believe I said that. America is a nation that can be defined in a single word.
Y'all ready for this?
I was going to put
And Corn Pop was a bad dude, and he ran a bunch of bad boys.
Wait. All men and women created by go. You know the thing. If it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to. Anyway. We went for two reasons. One, to come on, man. The guy who runs that outfit over there. I've had a couple Washington, but the nature, not Representative Jackie. Are you here? Where's Jackie? I didn't think she was going to be here. What am I doing here? Tucker. Yeah.
I got hairy legs that turn, that.
Thank you for tolerance, for listening to me. I appreciate it very much. What?
Okay, I think that's kind of funny. I'm sorry. I do. And I would venture to say that a lot of you at home are probably laughing watching that. That is probably what the New York Times was referring to in that last part of the sentence, which is broad scatological humor, which they're saying these videos and these memes that these Trump people are pushing out there are subscribing to. Let's just pause for a minute and just ask the question, is this worthy of a cover story? Let's say you were at home watching that and you don't think there's anything funny about that, and you don't think that Trump should have ever showed that at a Trump rally. Is it really something that you want to see on the cover of a newspaper? I don't know. And by the way, I do think it's funny, but if I were running a campaign, I just wouldn't engage in anything like that, because I really believe in just keeping things above board, talking about the issues. I would certainly not shy away from talking about the issue of President Biden's mental competency, which was, of course, displayed in that video. But I wouldn't go into that kind of realm of advertising for my campaign. But again, putting all of that aside, like, we're 2 months and a week after the October 7th massacre. We have all of these domestic problems, fentanyl overdoses, people crossing the border in droves. We have schools falling apart because of crazy woke ideologies being taught in the curriculum. We have the former president going through all of these legal troubles, which the Times does talk about later in the paper. But like, why is this your cover story? It just does seem, from a conservative person's perspective, like they're going out and just trying to troll Donald Trump at all times. Now, let's look at the other part of the sentence, which says that the memes are riddled with racist stereotypes, demeaning tropes about LGBTQ people, and then the last part is the broad scatological humor. One of the things that they talk about in this article, which I guess they're citing as a example of the racist stereotypes, is a video that was created after the Georgia RICO indictment of Donald Trump, which was pursued by the district attorney, Fani Willis. And so there was a video created, which I have watched, and here the New York Times cites the existence of this video in this article. And here's what they say about it. In August, when Mr. Trump was indicted on conspiracy charges related to his attempts to overturn the 2020 election in Georgia, several team members produced a music video targeting the Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis. A Kanye West parody, it used artificial intelligence to mimic Mr. Trump's voice rapping lyrics that were peppered with racist dog whistles, okay? This is the point at which I get conflicted about this article. Because frankly, I think the first part is just like, it's unimportant and it's kind of nonsense. Okay, who cares that people are creating these memes? Who cares that Trump, posted or played, this video of Biden bumbling at a rally? Like, we have far more important issues. Even if you disapprove of that, why is this your cover story, and why are you wasting any space on it? Going into this paragraph, I have to say, I'm not going to play this video of Fani Willis on this show because I just don't think it's appropriate. You can Google it. But I have to say, I did watch that music video and I thought it was a kind of disturbing. I actually, and those of you who watch my show know that I am not quick to say that people are dog whistling or that things are racist. We live in a world where everything is accused, everything and everyone is accused of being racist. But I have to say, I did watch this video and it made me uncomfortable. But here's the thing. This is, again, where I go back and forth, because the New York Times, I think, should report on this and should talk about the existence of this video and how it is being cheered on and created by people who support the president. And maybe that's not so great. But also, in this article, it kind of makes it seem like the Trump campaign was the one who created the video, when that's not true. The Trump campaign didn't create the video. It was a memester who created the video. If we look back at this paragraph, it says that, let's see here, that, where is the line that I'm looking for? Where is it? Sorry, hold on. Here, got it. Several team members produced a music video. So this is the paragraph. In August, when Mr. Trump was indicted on conspiracy charges related to his attempts to overturn the 2020 election in Georgia, several team members produced a music video targeting the district attorney. What does that mean? Several team members. Who does that refer to? Does that refer to several team members of the Trump campaign? Or does that refer to several team members of a meme team? It's unclear, but I think the New York Times should make that clear. I think that they have purposefully used that ambiguous language to kind of confuse you, because it's very easy when you're reading this article to go, oh my God, the Trump team members created this horrible video. It matters who created the horrible video. And this article is very long, and they need to, in that sentence, make it really clear. They should have put, if it's the team members of the meme group, they need to put that before saying team members. If it's team members of the Trump campaign, they need to say that. But the ambiguity here, to me, is not in line with the way that an objective news source in a cover, a news article, should be relaying information, okay? So look, I leave this obviously up to your discretion. I'd be very interested to hear what you think. Do you think this is worthy of a cover story? Do you agree with me that there are parts of it that are ridiculous? There are other parts of it that need to be reported on? I'd love to hear your thoughts. The final thing I'll say about this article too, before we move on to the next one, is that oftentimes in the New York Times, what people on the right take issue with, and I'm sympathetic to this argument, is not always what the New York Times says, but actually what the New York Times doesn't say. And so with regard to this issue, I think a lot of people on the right would go, okay, why is the New York Times focusing on meme accounts as their political social media story when there is a big political social media story in the news right now? And that is that the Biden administration is being sued by the attorney generals of Missouri and Louisiana for allegedly pressuring Facebook and Instagram to suppress certain political content, including anti-vaccine content. And we know that this lawsuit is going on right now, and that the Supreme Court is going to hear the case soon. And so conservatives look at this and they go, okay, again, why are you focusing on memes when there's this big, way more important political social media story that you need to focus on? And even if they're going to do the story on memes, why isn't there a sentence or a paragraph in the story which kind of zooms out and says, if we're having this discussion about the role of social media in political campaigns, let us make you aware of this big lawsuit that is going on right now? Because that's what news articles, when they're good, that's what they do. They tell you about a story, and then they tell you other background contexts that the story has to deal with. For example, when you see good news sources reporting on, climate change or drilling, they'll have a sentence that says, again, just using an example, the Biden administration has historically opposed drilling despite approving the $8 billion Willow project in Alaska a few months ago. In other words, they try to give you general context. And so if you're going to be talking about the social media with regard to the Trump administration, I think it's relevant context to reference this big case which has to do with campaigns' use of social media. Let me quickly make those of you aware, if you are unaware, of this case that is going on, because you certainly wouldn't be aware reading this article. So, as I said, the attorney generals of Missouri and Louisiana, are suing the Biden administration for allegedly pressuring social media platforms to suppress certain content. So here are some examples of what we know from the lawsuit of what they are alleging happened. So this specifically focuses on the Biden White House's director of digital media. His name is Rob Flaherty. And according to this lawsuit, there are emails between Mr. Flaherty and Facebook and Instagram executives where he is urging them to remove certain posts. So again, let's look here at some examples. In March of 2021, this is according to Daily Wire reporting, Mr. Flaherty allegedly emailed Facebook saying, quote, "We are gravely concerned that your service is one of the top drivers of vaccine hesitancy, period. We want to know that you're not playing a shell game." And he, in that same email, also disparaged Facebook for, quote, "promoting anti-vaccine pages in a search and directing attention to COVID skeptics." Okay? The Facebook executive allegedly responded and pledged to, quote, "remove vaccine misinformation and reduce virality of content discouraging vaccines that does not contain actionable misinformation." Okay, so we see that the Biden administration, if this is all true, and this is publicly available information in the lawsuits, which the Supreme Court is going to hear this case, if this is true, then the Biden social media director was emailing Facebook about this anti-vaccine content. Okay, here are some more examples. Mr. Flaherty also allegedly demanded that Facebook, quote, "limit the spread of viral content on WhatsApp, quote, given its reach in immigrant communities and communities of color." That is the government telling someone to suppress speech. The First Amendment says, "Nor shall Congress make any law suppressing freedom of speech." Here we have a member of the presidential administration trying to tell a platform, a facilitator of speech, what speech to promote and what speech to censor. Another example, Mr. Flaherty allegedly wrote to a Facebook executive telling him that January 6th was, quote, "plotted in large part on your platform." He wanted, quote, "assurances that Facebook would, quote, deplore an algorithmic shift that promoted quality news and information about the election." This is pretty damning. Flaherty also allegedly wrote to Facebook flagging a Tucker Carlson episode, and the Facebook exec apparently wrote back and said, "We're running it down now." And then there's some other examples of various accounts that Flaherty flagged and that they were removed from Facebook as a result of that email. And one of them was actually that they asked Facebook to take down a parody account of Dr. Anthony Fauci, and they did. So, knowing this story that is going on right now, this lawsuit is ongoing and the Supreme Court it's going to go before the Supreme Court soon. Do we think that the Trump meme story, which is, again, not his campaign putting out these memes, but his campaign, literally here, cheering on the flood of crude posts, as the New York Times says it, do you think that this meme story is the relevant social media story? Again, there are parts of it which need to be said. There are parts of it that are concerning and we should talk about. But what is the more relevant social media story? You decide. You write and tell me if I'm wrong. Okay. So that's story number one that I wanted to profile. Again, we're looking at three that have to do with the Trump-Biden matchup going forward with the 2020 presidential race. So the second big story, it's a cover story, is this impeachment inquiry that was launched yesterday, Wednesday, December 13th, 2023, by House Republicans. Here is the first paragraph of this story, as reported by the New York Times. Quote, "The House voted on Wednesday to formally open an impeachment inquiry into President Biden, pushing forward with a year-long GOP investigation that has failed to produce evidence of anything approaching high crimes or misdemeanors, okay? So I'm going to come out and say it. The first story, a little ambiguous. I could go back and forth about whether that should be in the New York Times, whether it was worthy of their coverage, whether it was done right. I can see both sides on that one. This first paragraph of this cover story about the impeachment inquiry is so unbelievably disgraceful. It really is. The fact that this objective article is saying that the GOP investigation has, quote, failed to produce evidence of anything approaching high crimes or misdemeanors, that is really, really bad. I'm not ambiguous on my condemnation of this one, okay? So let's consider that. If, in fact, the GOP investigation has failed to produce evidence of anything approaching high crimes or misdemeanors, let's look at some of the evidence that they have produced as a result of subpoenas of bank records and also bank records of members of the Biden family and Hunter Biden's business associates. That's one of the things they were looking at. And then, of course, another thing they were looking at was the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop, which were turned over to the FBI and, of course, also turned over to the media. Okay? So here's what we know. And again, you let me know if you think that this constitutes a failure to produce evidence of anything bad. Let's look. We know that two IRS whistleblowers came before Congress, Gary Shapley and Joseph Ziegler. By the way, I did a whole Julie Noted on this if you want a more deep dive. And they allege that the DOJ interfered in the IRS's criminal investigation of Hunter Biden's taxes. Mr. Shapley and Mr. Ziegler, under oath before Congress, alleged that the DOJ interfered by A, tipping off Hunter Biden's legal team to a planned search, B, preventing questions related to Joe Biden, C, delayed warrants, D, had prevented them from having access to Hunter Biden's laptop, and E, prevented them from having access to certain FBI documents that showed that Joe and Hunter each accepted $5 million bribes from Burisma, okay? So you may be hearing me say this and go, okay, Julie, well, that's bad. But what does this have to do with President Biden? Because President Biden is the one who's going to be impeached, not Hunter Biden. Well, the answer is that in this testimony, Ziegler and Shapley alleged that President Biden was directing and in some cases working with the DOJ in order to stall this investigation. Now, look, do their testimonies mean that they are telling the truth? No. We don't know if they're telling the truth. We certainly hope they're telling the truth because they're under oath. But in other words, two people's testimonies are not enough to go, okay, that is affirmatively true and we ought to impeach this president. But again, the New York Times has said that they have failed to produce evidence of anything approaching high crimes and misdemeanors. Having two IRS whistleblowers come before Congress, that is evidence. They are saying that they have failed to produce evidence. This is evidence. I'll go on. There's more evidence, not just with these whistleblowers. We know from the subpoenaed bank records that there are examples of the Biden family receiving millions of dollars from various foreign nationals. 20 plus shell companies, this we know, were created when then Vice President Biden was in office under the Obama administration. These shell companies were Hunter Biden and his business associates. They were run by Hunter Biden and his business associates, and they're called Robinson Walker LLC, Owasco LLC, Hudson West LLC, Rosemont Seneca LLC. Why would you create 20 LLC shell companies while your father is vice president? And we see that these companies were ways that that Hunter Biden and his business associates got these massive payouts from foreign nationals. And again, I know you're probably thinking, okay, well, what does this have to do with President Biden? Well, we see that these payments were doled out to different members of the Biden family. And there is evidence in some of the exchanges that some of the money may have, in fact, gone to President Biden. Now, when we're talking about bribes or alleged bribes, a lot of people think that a bribe, it would only count as a bribe if we know that President Biden was the sole recipient of that money. First of all, we do have evidence that indicates that there is a possibility that President Biden was a recipient of that money. But B, the definition of a bribe isn't necessarily that it would go to President Biden. It's that it would go to people who President Biden would want it to go to, i.e. his family members. So taking bribes, if like a mob boss took a bribe, but the money didn't go to him, it went to his wife, does that not count as a bribe? Of course it does, because the mob boss wants it to go to his wife. It's benefiting the family. I'm not necessarily trying to compare the Bidens to mob bosses, but I'm just using an example of bribery, okay? So we know from the subpoenaed bank records that there are these shell companies. We know that a lot of millions of dollars were funneled through these shell companies and dispersed out to the Biden family. Let's look at some examples. Again, I did whole episodes on this. I'm just telling this to you in order to indicate that the New York Times first sentence of this cover article, that saying that the GOP has failed to produce any evidence of anything approaching high crimes or misdemeanors for President Biden, I am trying to show you that that is absolute nonsense, and that is dishonest, and that is not objective journalism. Because we do have evidence, and here it is. In February of 2017, when Vice President Biden had just left office, there was a Chinese businessman named Ye Jianming, who is a founder and chairman of this Chinese energy company. Ye Jianming, met with Hunter Biden at a private dinner in Miami. After that, and by the way, this is very important, Ye Jianming is the owner of this energy company, and this energy company is a CCP, Chinese Communist Party-backed enterprise, because no company in China exists without the backing of the CCP, and we know that Ye Jianming is very close with President Xi Jinping of China. In fact, he is called the Belt and Road billionaire because he has helped Xi Jinping so much with the Belt and Road Initiative. Anyway, Hunter Biden, the former vice president's son, is meeting with this Chinese energy tycoon who is very, very close with the president of China. And we see in emails after their meeting that Mr. Jianming promised Hunter Biden $10 million annually for 3 years in return for introductions. Who do you think is providing those introductions? What are those introductions? You think Hunter Biden is just introducing him to like some friends, non-political friends he knows? No. The introductions that Ye Jianming wants are political introductions. This is another damning part. We also see in this email from Hunter Biden's laptop that they were discussing that a percentage stake of, quote, 10% would be held for the big guy. Okay? And Hunter Biden's business associates, James Gillar and Tony Bobulinski, testified under oath that the big guy refers to Joe Biden, okay? I could go on and on giving you examples of things in these emails which have been brought before Congress. But for your own sake, I'm going to pause, but direct you to the Julie Noted episode where I did go through this. But again, this is just to prove that it is incredibly dishonest for the New York Times to allege that the GOP has failed to produce any evidence of wrongdoing, because there are loads and loads of pieces of evidence that do indicate wrongdoing. Is it affirmative evidence that President Biden has absolutely committed a crime? No, but that's also the point of the impeachment inquiry, to really go through and make that assessment. I mean, by the way, I think this is pretty damning. I think it does indicate that something really bad happened. But again, putting that all aside, it is just so wrong for them to say that there is no evidence of anything approaching a high crime or misdemeanor. Okay, so that's story number 2. Now let's go to the editorial section of the New York Times. And again, this is an editorial section. Of course, people are allowed to voice whatever subjective viewpoint they want. But the point is to ask if conservatives reading this paper have confidence that the New York Times understands them and that the New York Times is going to voice certain viewpoints that espouse in a fair manner what the conservative ethos is about. And so, of course, people can write whatever they want. But again, it's all about, is this inspiring confidence? And I don't think this editorial is. I think this editorial is very unfair to conservatives. And also, it would be one thing if they had this editorial, which is very harsh on conservatives, but they also allowed other editorials that weren't so harsh. But at least when I read the New York Times, we see that there is really one viewpoint being espoused in their opinion pages. Okay? So today's column is from Charles M. Blow. Well, I'm really not sure who that is. No shade. I don't know. Could be just a regular citizen. Sometimes, they have these like think tank heads he's a regular writer. Oh, okay. Well, oops. I do read the editorial section regularly, but guess I don't always look at the author. But okay, so he's a regular editorial person, and his title is America's Thirst for Authoritarianism. That's what he wrote today. Let me read to you excerpts. Around the world, he says, authoritarianism is ascendant and democracy is in decline. Okay. Then he goes on and he's saying all these countries are sliding into authoritarianism, but the United States wasn't impervious to this trend. Here's another excerpt. Confidence in many of our major institutions, including schools, big businesses, the news media, is at or near its lowest point in the past half century, in part because of the Donald Trump-led right-wing project to depress it. Okay, let's pause there. He can say whatever he wants. He can write whatever he wants. I will champion his right to free speech. But conservatives reading this view this as very, very unfair, okay? That confidence in many of our major institutions is, he does say in part, but he's saying is because of the Donald Trump-led right-wing project to depress it. As if there are no other reasons to not have any confidence in our institutions, okay? Then this writer goes on and he's referencing this book by Tim Alberta, which talks about how, quote, many evangelical Christians have developed, in the words of the rightist Southern Baptist pastor Robert Jeffries, an under siege mentality that has allowed them to embrace Trump, whose decadent curriculum what is this word? VITAE. Curriculum vitae. I don't know that word. Runs counter to many of their stated values. It allows them to employ Trump as a muscle in their battle against a changing America. Just this whole idea that these evangelical Christians are holding on to a under siege mentality, which is allowing them to go against their shared values in support of Donald Trump. It's just disparaging, honestly, of a lot of evangelical Christians and why they support Donald Trump. I'm going to get to more of that in a moment, but I'll just read to you 2 more things. This thinking, this apparently under siege mentality that evangelical Christians have, gives them license or turns a blind eye to Trump's authoritarian impulses, okay? What's the pronunciation? I can't hear you.
The name of a document, which is a brief account of a person's education, qualifications, and previous occupations, typically sent with a job application. How do you go about pronouncing it in English? Curriculum vitae. Curriculum vitae.
This is why it's good to read newspapers. You learn. Wow. Before we continue, I want to tell you about MyPillow. I use many MyPillow products. I walk into work every day wearing the My slippers, and then I quickly change into heels. I sleep on the MyPillow and the Giza Dream bed sheets, and I use My towels, among other products. And you can get many of these products at a discount if you use the promo code Hartman. MyPillow's latest deal is the sale of the year. For a limited time, you'll get 60% off of the aforementioned Giza Dream bed sheets. That comes with a 60-day money-back guarantee and a 10-year warranty. You'll get a set for as low as $39.99 with the promo code Hartman. Just go to mypillow.com and click on the radio listener square and use the promo code Hartman, or call 1-800-566-6745 and use the promo code Hartman. Along with this offer, you'll get deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including the MyPillow mattress topper, the MyPillow towel sets, and more. So basically they're saying that these evangelical Christians have this under siege mentality, and they counter their values, and they support this authoritarian Donald Trump, which I just think is unfair. And then they end the editorial by saying, with Republicans beckoning authoritarianism and without an intact Obama coalition to thwart it, our democracy hangs by a thread. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what conservatives think reading this article. They think that this is incredibly unfair and paints conservatives out to be these people who just want to crusade against these institutions. That's basically what that sentence was saying, that we have lost our confidence in these institutions because of the right-wing project to depress it. Like, there's just kind of this project in the ether by the right wing to just relentlessly and indiscriminately go after these institutions for the sake of depressing our confidence in them. No, there are reasons why people don't have confidence in the institutions and why Donald Trump has criticized them. And then it's kind of like painting this idea of these, religious conservatives, and they're so hypocritical because they have this mentality and they support this authoritarian. And then the final sentence is Republicans are the authoritarians, and we don't have Obama to help us suppress those bigots. I want to provide some counter examples of some of the ways or some other examples of why conservatives lack confidence in our institutions, okay? And why a lot of conservatives in turn do support President Trump, because they think that he is one of the only people who is talking about these examples and will actually bring these certain agencies to account, okay? So let's look at the whole Hunter Biden laptop story's Russian disinformation debacle. 51 ex-intelligence officials signed a letter saying that the laptop story was Russian disinformation. Turns out it was not. Turns out it was verified. They knew that. This was handed over, the hard drive of the laptop contents was handed over to the FBI. It is really, really, really easy and very quick to verify if the contents of something are in fact true. But nevertheless, these intelligence officials signed this letter before the 2020 election, literally a month before, in order to convince the American people that many of the damning things, including the allegations of bribery in that laptop story, were false. They were just planted by Russia. Does that inspire confidence that these agencies are something that are things that we should have confidence in? No. That's one example. Another example, also with regard to social media, is that the FBI paid Twitter $3 million leading up to the 2020 presidential election. The FBI, members of the FBI met with Twitter weekly to suppress conservative content. The former general counsel of the FBI is this guy named James Baker. He went to go work at Twitter, and it was discovered that he specifically was the one who quashed the New York Post from tweeting out the Hunter Biden laptop story, or at least once the New York Post did tweet it out, they quashed it, had it taken down. Again, does that inspire confidence in the FBI? if they're meeting weekly with big tech and paying big tech as big tech is suppressing conservative content. I'll give another example. There was the January 6th committee, which was headed in part by Liz Cheney, who was featured in the Wall Street Journal, by the way, in the editorial section, as I said. And for a year, the January 6th committee convened, and they promised to show the American people what happened on January 6th and give an honest assessment of that day. Well, it turns out that once Republicans took over Congress and the January 6th committee was disbanded, then Speaker Kevin McCarthy found that there were 40,000 hours of footage of January 6th, which was not revealed to the public. He handed that footage over to Tucker Carlson, who showed some video of 9 different Capitol Police officers escorting the QAnon shaman, as he is called, Jacob Chansley, that big guy with the horns, through the Capitol. Turns out that that video being released actually got Jacob Chansley released from prison. He was in prison for trespassing and going into the Capitol on January 6th. But it turns out that he was being let in and escorted through the Capitol by Capitol police officers. And that is exculpatory evidence, which was not handed over. And now that the Republicans came into Congress, handed over this footage for Tucker Carlson, who showed it to the world, this guy got out of jail because that footage was not shown at his trial. Again, does that inspire confidence in our government or in these institutions? That they would hold on to 40,000 hours of footage, including footage of Capitol Police escorting someone who's in prison through the Capitol, someone who's in prison for allegedly trespassing? There are so many more examples. I literally have a whole list here. How about the FBI internal memo, which was released by Kyle Seraphin, who was on this show Timeless? There was an FBI internal memo that he whistleblew on, which said that Catholic Americans are violent extremists. How about the fact that conservatives were shouted down and taken off of social media for saying early on in the pandemic that COVID-19 may have originated not from a bat, but from a lab in Wuhan? Remember, that was the lab leak theory. It was a conspiracy theory, and conservatives were vilified for it, and then it turned out to be true. Does that inspire confidence in our government that they're telling us the truth, or that they're treating Americans equally? Again, just example after example. How about the Steele dossier? The Steele dossier was a document that was compiled of sources that were chosen by the Clinton campaign to allege that Donald Trump colluded with Russia to steal the 2016 election. That dossier was then used by the FBI, even though the sources were uncorroborated, and it turns out the sources later admitted that they made the whole thing up. The FBI used the Steele dossier to obtain a FISA warrant to spy on members of the Trump campaign. I know a lot of this is dizzying. I could list a lot of examples, but again, the point is this. This editorial is saying that we've lost confidence in our institutions because these conservatives, and especially religious conservatives with these, us versus them mentalities, are following this leader, Donald Trump, who just decides to go on these campaigns to indiscriminately and without basis tear down our institutions. It is not indiscriminately. It is not without basis. These institutions have not inspired confidence in the American people. And this New York Times editorial is not inspiring confidence in the readers that the people who this paper chooses to espouse certain viewpoints and assess the situation of American politics really has a handle on what 50% of the country believes. So, all of that is to say, in some cases, maybe the political right exaggerates about the lack of credibility of the New York Times. But in other cases, especially with the allegedly objective news articles like this impeachment inquiry, it doesn't seem to be unfounded. Let me know what you think. Of course, comment below. Tell me what you agree with, disagree with as far as what I said. And you can always email me at julie@julie-hartman.com, especially if you think I got something wrong. I read a lot of facts there. I'm very diligent about my research and making sure that all of these examples that I'm giving to you are true. But you know what? If you ever have a correction for me or something that I didn't consider, I always want to hear it because I care very, very much about the truth, unlike perhaps some other institutions. Take care. I'll see you soon.